Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and in today's podcast we're going to talk about fixing the broken model for delivering major infrastructure projects in the UK. So why do we need to fix this model? Well, as we know, Britain needs high-performing infrastructure to improve the productivity of our economy and boost living standards across all of our communities. Yet the model we use to deliver and operate much of this infrastructure is broken. Too often it produces assets and networks that are expensive, perform poorly and fail to exploit the advances in technology that are transforming other industries, and too often the supply chain that delivers our infrastructure seems locked into a cycle of low margins, low investment and dysfunctional relationships. Not my words, but those of the 2017 Infrastructure Client Group report From Transactions to Enterprises, which really unpacked the challenge. And recent project outcomes bear this conclusion out. If we consider projects such as Crossrail, Jubilee Line Extension, West Coast Mainline Upgrade, Hinkley Point C, HS2, the list goes on. So, back in 2017, following this ITG report, Project 13 was born to tackle the problem. And 7 years on, the project is going from strength to strength with support from the World Economic Forum and the Institution of Civil Engineers, plus, of course, a rake of influential businesses, people and projects. So to find out a bit more, my guest today is Dale Evans, Chair of the Project 13 Strategy Group and partner at Allura Infrastructure. Dale has been intimately involved in the evolution of Project 13 from his time chairing the ITG and while driving industry change as he led the influential @One Alliance for Anglian Water. So, Dale, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Pleasure. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about Project 13 progress.
Well, tell us about it. It seeks to develop a new business model to boost certainty and productivity in delivery, improve whole life outcomes in operation. So how does it do that, Dale?
So can I cover that with a bit of background maybe on where Project 13 came from? If you go back to 2016, I think it was, there was a conversation between Institution of Civil Engineers, the Infrastructure Client Group and the IPA, which recognised the need for a new delivery model for infrastructure, and we committed to working together to find that way. But rather than theorise or hypothesise, what we actually decided to do was to research best practice, recognising that in the midst of fairly ordinary performance, there were some exemplars, projects and programmes that have delivered exemplar results, and in some cases done it for an extended period of time. So we set a research team up to go and understand, well, what are the characteristics of those exemplars? How did they do it? And what we identified pretty consistently was, as you described, that shift from transaction to enterprise. They weren't bound by traditional in-series procurement and scope-based tendering. Owners created integrated enterprise to deliver their programs or projects. So, that was the genesis of transaction to enterprise and Project 13. And while there are some significant differences about enterprise delivery, the reason that background is important to me is because Project 13 is drawn from industry best practice. Right. I mean, it is research, documented best practice. And that's the core aim of Project 13, continues to be how do we identify, consolidate and share learning across the Project 13 community.
Well, you talk about transactional arrangements and moving to an enterprise model. Just unpack that slightly. Tell what exactly do you mean, and why is it so different? Yeah,
so there's some key headline differences. Firstly, an enterprise is set up to deliver outcomes. It's not set up to deliver scope. That's predefined by an owner or a designer. An enterprise is set up to deliver a set of outcomes, which I'm sure we'll come back to. They have a broader view of value for money. So you've already highlighted this bit about low margin cost. They recognise outcomes as part of value for money. They use intelligent baselines, and they recognise management of input. So that broader value for money provides a starting framework that is immediately different. Mm-hmm. They integrate all aspects of deliveries and teams. They engage the wider ecosystem, and then they use all of those enablers to change the way they deliver. So, there are some headline differences around Project 13. Stuff that doesn't sound extreme. A lot of it sounds like common sense, but it really does bump into some pretty embedded industry practice.
I mean, I suppose ultimately the model hopes to support a more sustainable, innovative and high-skilled industry. Clearly talent is a critical issue as the sector wrestles with new technology, carbon reduction and the need to operate in a financially constrained world. I mean, are you seeing results? Are you seeing this new model bringing new talent in and really delivering this more sustainable, highly skilled industry?
Yeah, no, we are. I mean, a bit about progress first, then the talent piece. So I think we're seeing progress across all enterprise models, and some of the original examples, like the Anglian Water Alliances, have delivered significant improvements, efficiency, carbon, time, as of others, and that provides a bit different backdrop, doesn't it? I mean, there are a couple of really key points around talent and people. I think enterprises engage with partners and suppliers when they can add value. It more effectively leverages that capability and the capability across the ecosystem. So, given the capability in that wider supply group, then we should be looking to models that harness that and use that innovative potential. And secondly, a sort of slightly different point. The integrated collaborative enterprises focused on delivering outcomes are a more engaging and fulfilling environment. I mean, they capture the purpose of what we do far more effective than traditional delivery. So I think you can say they do attract a more talented and a more diverse workforce.
Yeah. Well, it just creates better places for everyone to work, where everyone's feeling that they're all actually chasing the same outcomes rather than battling it out. Are you seeing less confrontation on projects? I
mean, these are integrated collaborative models. I think you're seeing, you are seeing a very different environment, and that's what owners have focused on, which again sounds ridiculously simple to do, but they've focused on creating an environment where teams can perform effectively. So you are seeing a different environment. What you're not seeing in order to get there is a reduction in commercial tension. So one of the things that's often thrown in collaborative models is that, where's the tension from? Project 13 enterprise models actually create, lots of commercial tension. They're very challenging models, but it's commercial tension that drives the right behaviour, not the wrong behaviour.
So it's not just one big love-in. It's actually, it's driving the behaviours which are actually driving towards the right outcomes. Before we get into a bit more detail about Project 13, I quoted from the 2017 Infrastructure Client Group report. But of course, many folk like you have been battling, to promote industry change for quite some time. I mean, how has the ICG, for instance, helped to drive that required change? Are you getting there, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. And again, by producing a sort of an industry approach to improvement. And I reflect on the journey for ICG. It's quite interesting to look back, because I think when we first set the group up, which is sort of 2015, we used to meet, but we always tended to regard our challenges particular and unique to us. I mean, we wanted to be there, but we thought we were different. And after time, you sort of realise that actually, whether you're in water, whether you're in roads, whether you're in rail, you do face similar challenges, and you probably got learning that you can share. And once you get there, then you do start to create this whole approach about sharing learning and supporting each other in our respective journeys. And I think that's what is sort of simple but really exciting about the Infrastructure Client Group, is it has created a sector group that is sharing learning and building industry momentum.
Yeah. Well, of course, you led the Anglian At-One Alliance until 2018, which was, well, in many ways, a groundbreaking attempt to bring the industry supply chain together for mutual benefit. And as you say, it wasn't a cosy thing. There was some big commercial tension in there, I think, for quite some time. What did you learn from that process?
I think three things. Like when I reflect back, I took away. One, this very direct link between managing behaviours and value, which can sound uncomfortably soft in our sector, but we put a real emphasis on establishing the right behaviours, and we developed a model and we designed the commercial arrangements to drive those. And as you said, that comes out with some fairly demanding commercial challenges, but they're one that create aligned, positive commercial tension. So that emphasis on behaviour would definitely be one. I mean, that was a big part of the road to success. Secondly, the whole value in engaging with the wider supply system, and huge amount of the potential innovation and the capability is within that wider supply chain. And if you go and talk to organisations like Anglia, they talk about good examples and case studies. They nearly always use engagement with the supply chain as an enabler, or that they cite that as being an enabler. And then the third is, the Alliance made a real difference in how we deliver. So in the end, delivery on the ground, delivering projects looked very different. And it was platform delivery, much more like production and construction, high degrees of standardization. But that change came from upstream changes, or the change in how we delivered came from upstream changes. And I think there's a really important part for our industry here that looking at how we engaged, how we incentivized, how we brought teams together, opened up a very different way of working. So things like platform delivery aren't about interventions in a traditional model. They're about creating models that enable teams to work differently. So I look back, and the model delivers very differently, but it is the upstream change that enabled that to happen.
But of course, Project 13, it's not the only show in town when it comes to industry transformation. I mean, a lot of the words you are using there, you do hear them when you talk to people about the IPA's Transforming Infrastructure Performance Programme, for example. I mean, how does Project 13 compare or coexist with projects such as TIP?
So I honestly think this is one of the more exciting points for our industry, and because of where we were. So I can remember sitting at an ICG meeting, back pre-Project 13, when the group had recognised that industry would be able to respond more effectively if all of the initiatives were aligned and coherent. So, we set out to produce an industry map of what change looks like and how these things all fitted together. And a few meetings later, we concluded we couldn't. I mean, they weren't aligned and they weren't coherent. And against that, how on earth does industry respond to the call for change? But that isn't the case now. I honestly think for the first time I've worked in this industry, the key initiatives and the key groups provide a consistent view of what change looks like. So, transforming infrastructure performance, the construction playbook, Project 13, digital task force. I mean, they come at it from different perspectives, but actually they're pretty much all calling for the same sort of direction. Yeah. So for our industry, responding to change is now a much more achievable thing than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Dale, that's a relief. Well, let's delve a bit deeper into Project 13, and we've talked about its origins, its ambitions, and you've got a number of so-called pillars that are underpinned by principles. Let's talk through some of those, starting with the capable owner. I mean, there's been some discussion I noticed on LinkedIn by Simon Murray, who of course is very, very influential in the setup of Project 13, talking about the intelligent client, what exactly that means. I mean, how do you describe the capable owner? Is it the same as an intelligent client?
Project 13 talks about capable owner for a couple of reasons, I think. I mean, to put the emphasis on this sort of slightly wider set of capabilities that infrastructure owners should develop and to support the sort of shifts to outcomes. We are seeing the owner's role is effectively developing and delivering outcomes delivered through an infrastructure system. And that's slightly different from sort of just seeing a client role in terms of managing projects. So I think, capable owner is a broader view, but the common point is the intelligence. I mean, you still need to be an intelligent client, and you need to understand your assets and the cost and the time and the carbon associated with those assets to manage it effectively.
Right. I mean, I suppose the challenge has always been that in infrastructure, a lot of clients are one-time only clients. Building stuff, creating new infrastructure is actually a kind of a business disrupting activity. It's something that they do under duress. So how do you sort of match that? Those different types of clients.
Well, so I think the capability you need as a client is available through others. So if you're a one-time client, you can still access that capability. And you can do it through the relationships you form, or you can do it through the sort of communities and groups that we're talking about. So it clearly is a different challenge. And you're not going to develop a long-term capability, but you can still find ways to bring that in and access it. I mean, it's not being a capable owner isn't about a huge depth and huge volumes. It's about, your understanding, your approach. So it is a practical proposition to be a capable owner on a one-off project.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about governance, but you also talk again about integration as one of your pillars and collaboration, teamwork, promoting well-being. It's all important and familiar stuff. I suppose what still stops all this from happening?
So traditionally, we don't think about integration at a level, never mind integrated teams. We think in terms of project solutions, and we create silos around those projects. And when it comes to bringing capability on board and procuring, we procure in series. So, we don't bring organisations in until we can define scope to efficient level to run a competitive tender. So the whole notion of establishing a team to deliver something, it just doesn't exist in that way of working. So what Project 13 recognises, if we can design, we can put in place models where we create integration, where we create high-performing teams. We'll leverage capability. We'll give people the opportunity to think about, how they deliver outcomes, and the results of that are evident in what we're seeing. So again, the barriers are pretty evident. So it's our inherent project-based approach, and it's our approach to procurement. And they're changes that are pretty hard because we're talking about pretty embedded practices.
Which I suppose brings us to another pillar, which is around organisation. You talk about engaging the right suppliers at the right time and developing the right delivery team. The constant challenge, of course, in the sector is moving away from lowest cost. Is that possible?
Yeah, that is. And again, the good thing is we've got some case studies and examples which demonstrate it's possible. And I'm not underplaying that sort of emphasis on lowest cost, but it is absolutely a barrier. So two things that some of our examples are demonstrating. Owners taking that slightly broader view to value for money that I talked about. So if at the outset you see value for money in a slightly broader context, outcomes, baselines, benchmarks, and you then cascade that through how you make project decisions, how you procure, you can take a different approach. And then, more specifically, we're seeing enterprise models use should cost modeling to define what good value looks like. So, they're using intelligence, benchmarks, baselines. They're using that as a starting point, and they're working with partners to deliver within that to incentivize and create that imperative change. So, things around value for money should cost models are leading to a different approach where value isn't best represented by lowest cost at the end of a tender.
It's hard though, Dale, isn't it? Increasingly hard nowadays, particularly on public projects, because there is simply less money around. Yeah,
but that fits with the outcome bit, doesn't it? I mean, that amplifies the whole focus on outcomes bit, because if we're thinking about outcomes, we're thinking about how do we deliver that from a system, how do we manage, optimize, develop a system to deliver those outcomes. We're not just thinking about how do we build stuff all the time. So, the less value, getting more for less, absolutely fits with the whole outcome agenda.
Yeah. I suppose the most cost-efficient thing to build is to not build anything at all.
Yeah.
Well, the final pillar in your strategy, of course, is the digital transformation, ensuring the right people have the right information at the right time to make better decisions. I mean, is that about embracing BIM, or as I constantly get in trouble for mentioning life beyond BIM?
So it's life beyond BIM. So it's about information and recognizing information is a key enabler to all of the things that we've just been talking about. When we invest in infrastructure, we're looking to deliver outcomes from a system, and we have to manage information at that system level and start from a customer user perspective. So it might sound a bit broad and it might sound a bit big, but it's really, when you boil it down, it's about recognizing information as a fundamental enabler and understanding the flow of information through our process. The work of the Digital Transformation Task Group has shown that those organizations who are starting their journey from an information perspective and making most progress, compared with those who see it as a technology or a system issue. I mean, it's a bit broad, but I'd encourage anyone looking at their digital agenda to just go to the data and digital principles for project success on the Project 13 handbook. That breaks the whole information piece down to 8 guiding principles.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that people will be directed. I'll put a link in the show notes to make sure people have access to all the information that's around Project 13. But of course, none of this is new for you, Dale. You've been wrestling, as I said earlier, with the change for quite some time, all the time I've known you, really. It's about many of the same challenges around efficiency, productivity, and change that we've been talking about for the last 20 years. I mean, what keeps you so enthused and trying to make this industry change?
Well, I think it's a few things to do with the industry and the change. I mean, I honestly think in infrastructure we're blessed to work in a sector that makes a huge contribution to society, to people, to communities, to environment, and infrastructure plays such a central role and has such a direct impact. I mean, how can you not be compelled by the contribution we make? I still think, I'm an engineer, I still think engineering and construction is a creative environment. Even after 40 years, I still find the process of creating something exciting and compelling. But then the other bit is the change. I think we work in an environment where there's lots of opportunity. I mean, there's lots of opportunity for us to do things better. And there is going to be lots of change. So, managing that change is probably the bit that in the end I find most fulfilling about this sector.
Well, you worked quite a lot of your career in the utilities sector, not so much of late, but certainly for many years, and you were 18 years with Anglian Water. Is the water sector, or was the water sector, a particularly great platform for driving change?
I think first of all, we had at Anglian was a leadership team that instinctively believed there was a better way of delivering our program and a better way to work with partners. And since other organisations have shown that committed leadership is the key platform to change. So having said that, I think that was the important starting point. I mean, there are some bits about the water sector that, good enablers, 5-year programs, visibility of work, the opportunity to engage with partner on a longer term relationship rather than just a project basis. And then there's this sort of backdrop around, cost intelligence that comes with the regulatory framework. Yeah. So, there undoubtedly were some enablers, but the fundamental enablers of Anglian's journey was the leadership it started with.
Well, a bit more about you, Dale. I mean, you've been involved in what I might describe as the politics of the sector, and it's a few TLAs, the ICG, the CLC, the Construction Leadership Council, the MPA, Major Projects Association, lots of organisations that you get involved in. I mean, how do these organisations move beyond just being talking shops?
So they all play slightly different roles, don't they? And I think there's examples that point to where they can add most value. I mean, I've talked about the ICG being more about communities, sharing and creating best practice. But I think the really key points are what we covered earlier, really. For all those groups, you need an overall direction for the industry that's aligned and coherent. And then, there's a huge responsibility on those bodies to maintain and demonstrate that they are driving the same agenda and it is aligned. And, I do think we've got more of that than we've had for a long time.
Well, I also noticed you spent 5 years working in New Jersey, in the US, in public-private partnerships contracts with US utility market in 1995. I mean, how did that foray in the US come about, and what did you learn from it?
So it came back because Anglia set up a joint venture with American Water, which is one of the few American utilities, to sort of manage and run utility operations in the States. And it was a great experience. I mean, huge learning experience for me, because what became apparent and what I learned a huge amount about was our success in taking on a city or a municipal operation, which were complex operations to do with water energy. It wasn't about our technical capability. It was about how effectively we could manage the change. How could we engage and transition an organisation that has worked a certain way for an extended period of time to work differently. So, I learned a huge amount around change and managing change within an organisation. I mean, great time, great fun.
You've been working for yourself since 2018, now as a partner at Allura Infrastructure. What is that, and what are you up to at the moment?
So Allura is a small strategy team that we brought together to support organisations looking to change the way that they deliver their investment or their programme. The team have all been through that journey, so we're a bunch of practitioners. We've all had the
you all had the scars.
We've all had the plaudits and the scars, definitely, that came from doing it. And that's the intent really, is to use that experience to help other organisations as they develop and implement their strategies. So it's really an extension of some things we've been talking about. It's a chance to do something that we as a team believe in, and another opportunity to contribute to industry progression. And we're working with some great clients as we do that.
Right, any projects you can do? Any clients you can talk about?
Yeah, we're after clients from across the sector. So Sellafield, United Utilities, Network Rail, clients from across the sector. But again, common point is they're clients looking to improve the way they deliver their program.
Clearly, you've got lots of plates spinning, Dale. How do you relax? How do you take your mind off work? What do you do when you're not thinking about changing the industry?
Family. So I have 3 daughters. They've all got lovely partners, and I've got 3 grandchildren. So all of that keeps you fairly grounded and it keeps you fairly balanced. When I can, I love sport. I love being outside, time with friends. So lots of stuff I'd like to do more of. And I'm sure for all of us, quality of life's a constant work on, isn't it? But we're working at it.
Well, hopefully you can spend more and more time doing that as you get this industry into shape that won't need quite so much of your consulting input. Who knows? But of course, 30 years ago, we had the Latham Review of Construction. I mean, do you ever feel slightly depressed that we're still talking about the same issues and trying to deal with the same challenges?
So optimistic, not depressed, but I think there are a couple of important points. So I think there is, what we have to recognise that initiatives advocating for similar change over a long period of time can inevitably bump into a bit of cynicism. So we have to make sure we don't create initiative fatigue at industry level, I think, because you're right, some of these things have been advocated. So what we have to do and what things at Project 13 have to demonstrate is that there are examples, there's real change, there are case studies. We have to be advocating for the adoption of real demonstrable progress, not holding up some improvement theory and call to arms. So I think, that's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic, because I think where our industry is, we're seeing organisations working together, we're seeing emerging best practice that others can adopt and learn from. So we're starting to see an industry continuous improvement process. So in terms of what's actually happening, I'm hugely optimistic. But I think you make a good point. We need to be careful we don't create cynicism because we're still saying the same old stuff without demonstrating real progress.
Mm. Oh, would you agree? I mean, I've said before that there is a risk that the sector has got in a muddle over cost versus quality, over outputs versus outcomes. I mean, do you see it that way? Is it changing?
Yeah, no, I think it is. So I think your point is right. Too often we've seen cost as a definition of value, and margin becomes part of that picture. So breaking the loop between low margin, low investment, and therefore low productivity is absolutely core to things at Project 13.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't, by definition, be low margin, should we? I mean, if we want investment in technology, we want partners to invest in innovation, they should have the potential to earn a good return. And it's all subject to performance.
Yeah.
And they need to add value to do that. But that we've got to break that loop between low margin, low investment, low productivity, definitely. But we are seeing examples of exactly where that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, so who fundamentally needs to change? Is it all about the client, or is there a lot of change that needs to happen across the entire sector?
Well, you can't get away from the clients enable that change, don't they? And I think it's interesting. You see a number of clients confident enough and bold enough to talk about the fact they want their partners to generate a good return. And they're clear that that's because they add value, not just because they, regardless, get a good profit. But those clients are standing up and saying, in order to create the right conditions, in order to create real progress, if our partners are performing, then they should earn a good return. So my point is, they're not just building it into the model; they're standing up and saying that in order to create the right background effect.
Yeah.
So I think we are seeing some move away from that. Emphasis on low margin work has been a measure of success.
Yeah.
And a characteristic of our industry.
Well, back to Project 13 then. I mean, you chair the strategy group. And what's next on the horizon for Project 13? What's the strategy group up to at the moment in terms of really driving this project forward and getting it out there to make that change in the industry?
So three things, I think. I mean, how do we keep growing adoption of Project 13? So how do we bring other organisations in and help them adopt an enterprise approach for their program? So, as you said at the start, the growth, given we only started this in 2018 when the reports were first published, the adoption is already pretty significant across our sector and both internationally. So what that does is it grows the Project 13 community, and it means that we're learning more across a broader base. So the second part of Project 13 is how do we then capture that learning, how do we consolidate it, and how do we make it available to other people? Growing adoption, growing the community, and finding better ways to share learning across that community. Those are the key aims for Project 13.
I suppose fundamentally, how can listeners today get involved? How do they do that?
They can start by joining the Project 13 community. I mean, that's level one. Beyond that, there's an opportunity to get involved in the various groups in the communities. I mean, some will get involved in the adopter group if they're on the journey. And the adopter group is a fantastic place. You see organisations sitting down, people sitting down, sharing learning so openly. Fantastic. There's a supplier strategy group, organisations from across the whole ecosystem contributing to Project 13 and setting direction. So, join the Project 13 community, go on the platform, and then look at where you think you could add value and get involved from there. So I'd hope there's lots of opportunity for people to do that.
So I suppose finally, Dale, do you think there'll ever be a moment when an initiative like Project 13 is no longer necessary?
So I hope not, because if we get to that stage, we've missed something, haven't we? So it's a really brief story. Right? If I go back to when Anglian started its journey, we benchmarked other sectors and tried to understand what the differences are. And one of the really stark differences was this whole thing about continuous improvement at industry and organisation level that you could see in other sectors and you couldn't find in construction. It doesn't exist, or it didn't exist. And what we see now is an industry collaborating, organisations learning together, and you can see the momentum that's been created off the back of that. So, so I hope things like Project 13 are about industry continuous improvement and therefore should always play a part and always build a role. So that's the bit I think most out of and most excited about. I think our industry is progressing collectively, and that's where the momentum is going to come from.
I think the point being that it's a constant process of learning to get better and better and better, get better outcomes. So thanks so much. It's a great point to end on, Dale. A huge amount for us all to think about there. So thanks for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast to help us to understand change and help understand a bit more about Project 13's contribution. So thanks very much, Dale.
Pleasure.
Great. Well, that's all we've got time for today. There'll be more for the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information to all the issues discussed today and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share with your colleagues. So thanks for joining us, and thanks again to Dale. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.